Welcome to Miss O Math Help. In this video, we will be discussing simplifying fractions, and I will share two methods for finding the simplest form of fractions. So as you move into older grades, into higher grades, a lot of times you will end up with a fraction as an answer, and you will be asked to write that fraction in simplest form. So I want to share two different methods with you today. The first one is dividing by common factors. So ultimately, we really want to find the greatest common factor of the numerator and the denominator to simplify, because if we can find the greatest common factor, then we end up with the simplest form without having to keep dividing over and over. But it's really not necessary to find the greatest common factor, as long as you know that you can keep dividing if the fraction ends up not being in simplest form. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If we want to find the greatest common factor for 6 and 24, one trick that I always teach my students is if one of the numbers will divide into the other one, then the greatest common factor is the lowest number. So 6 divides into 24. So the greatest common factor of 6 and 24 is 6. So I want to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number. And by doing that, I'm really dividing by 1, because I'm dividing by 6 over 6, or 6 divided by 6, and 6 divided by 6 is 1. So I'm not changing the value of the fraction at all, but I am writing it in what we call simplest form, or some people, you will hear them say lowest terms. So what I want to do is I want to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number. In this case, I'm dividing by 6, which is the greatest common factor of 6 and 24. And then when I do that, 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. And when I get to a point where the greatest common factor of my numerator and denominator is 1, then I know I'm finished. So 1 and 4, their greatest common factor is 1. So I know that this is my fraction in simplest form. Now let's look at 18/30ths. I could find the GCF, or the greatest common factor, of 18 and 30 by listing my factors. These are the factors of 18. 30, the factors are going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, 15, and 30. So I can do it this way. I can find the greatest common factor, which is going to be 6, and then I can divide by that number. 18 divided by 6 is 3. 30 divided by 6 is 5. That works. But if I don't really want to go through listing all the factors and find the greatest common factor, what I can do is just look at the two numbers. They're both even. So I know I can divide both of them by 2. So as long as you have even numbers, numerator and denominator, you can divide by 2. So let's go down here and look at that. So if I just divide them both by 2 first, then I end up with 9 over 15. And then I need to think of a factor that 9 and 15 have in common. I can list factors, or I can just, think, okay, 9 is 3 times 3 and only has factors of 1, 3, and 9. 15 has factors of 1, 3, 5, and 15. They do have 3 in common. So let's divide both of them by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And I still end up with the same answer. So we can either find the greatest common factor and divide by that, or we can just keep dividing by common factors until we get to that simplest form. And 3 and 5, the only factor that they have in common is 1, so we know that we can stop there. So that was one strategy, dividing by common factors, whether that's GCF or just a series of common factors. Either way will work, as long as you know when you get to the simplest form. Now I'm going to use the same two fractions that we used in the previous strategy, and we're going to look at strategy number 2, which is using prime factorization to simplify fractions. If you're really good with prime factorization, you can use it, and I think it's a great way to do this. If you're not familiar with prime factorization, I do have a video that I will share with you at the end on prime factorization. So if you're good with it, that's great. It's a really nice way to simplify fractions. So the prime factorization of 6 is 2 times 3. The prime factorization of 24 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So write the prime factorization of each number. Then mark out the factors that they have in common. So I see a 2 and a 2 here. Mark those out. So one has to be on top, one has to be on the bottom. And then there's a 3 and a 3. You cannot mark out these two 2s. One of them has to be in the numerator and one has to be in the denominator to cancel them or to mark them out. Now, if you mark out everything in the numerator, then your numerator is going to be 1. Okay, and then in the denominator here, we're going to multiply 2 times 2 to get the denominator. So just multiply everything that's left over after you mark out what they have in common. So the numerator is going to be 1 because I didn't have anything left in the numerator. The denominator is going to be 2 times 2. And remember, in the previous strategy, we also got 1/4 for 6 24ths. Okay, let's look at 18 30ths. So the prime factorization for 18 is 2 times 3 times 3. And the prime factorization for 30 is 2 times 3 times 5. Two prime factorizations have in common. They have a 2 and a 2, and they have a 3 and a 3. Now remember, we can't mark out the 2 3s that are in the numerator. It has to be one in the numerator, one in the denominator, because really what we're doing is we're marking out 2 divided by 2, that's 1. 3 divided by 3, that's 1. So we can cancel those out. And then what do we have left over? We have a 3 in the numerator, and we have a 5 in the denominator. And if you remember from the previous strategy, we also got 3/5 for 18 30ths. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.